Showdown at Warg-Tooth Crossing, Chapter 5. Kale tamped down the smoldering tobacco in his pipe and took a draw to keep it lit. He sat on a creaky makeshift chair on what could be called the deck of his dwelling. He had managed over the past couple of months to gather enough supplies to build a rough wooden shack and a small stable for his horse. It wasn't much, but it kept the wind and rain out. Whether it would suffice for the cold and the approaching winter was another matter. He gazed out over the rolling prairie that was his plot of land. He placed his shack on a rise with a good all-around view. Immediately southward, his land dipped to a stream, which supplied him with his water and also supported a large stand of trees. Even through the end of summer without much rain, the stream had remained flowing, which eased Kale's mind considerably. His land extended beyond the stream about another mile, and though it was too dry to grow crops, it would definitely suffice for rangeland. Kale had bought some posts and rope to put up a corral for cattle he planned to get. As time drew on, he thought that plan would probably have to wait for next spring. Kale cocked an ear to one side, then stood up to look around the corner of the shack. He thought he heard something, and sure enough, there was a figure walking along the south trail from Warg-Tooth Crossing. Most folks went mounted, so a figure walking was peculiar, especially since Kale lived a good 7 miles south of town. But when he spotted the robes and satchel, he knew it must be Eris. Kale leaned against the shack, enjoying the last of his smoke as Eris slowly approached. "Howdy," Kale called out when Eris was within earshot. "Hello," replied Eris. "Quite a walk. What brings you out this way?" "Gathering components as usual, and I thought I'd see how you were doing. It's been a little while since you've been in town." "Setting this place up has been keeping me busy." Eris looked around. "So I see. Do you happen to have any water handy?" "Of course. Come and sit down out of the sun." Kale ushered Eris into his shack. It was one room with a bed in one corner and a table in the middle, and some shelves near where the stone hearth had been built. Kale brought the chair in from outside and offered it to Eris while he got a mug from a shelf and filled it with water from a pitcher. Shutters clacked lazily in the breeze from one of the 3 window holes Kale had cut into the walls. Kale grabbed himself a mug as well and sat down on the bed. Eris drank deeply. "Good water." "Yeah, that stream is always fresh, thankfully." Eris gazed around the shack. The hearth was well built, and a good pile of wood sat nearby. Kale had taken care of all the necessities of life, if not the comforts. "So, how has homesteading been going?" Kale wiped some sweat from his brow and took a drink himself. "All right, I guess." "You have enough supplies?" "I'm all right. Look, why are you here, Eris?" Eris set down his mug on the rickety table and took a deep breath. "I don't like the way Bull is running the town." "Take it up with Bull, then." "We all know what he's doing, trading the scalies for somat. So, the money he brings in pays for the mercs that keep the scalies from burning everyone out of here." "That's how I used to think too, but they've gotten a little too drunk, so to speak, on their own power." "Shocking." "I'm serious. I arrived here about 6 months before you did. They weren't too bad then, but he's brought some more men in since you did that job for him, and they're having their way with the town." "What do you mean?" "The drinking and the fighting, for one. It's gotten so that honest folks can't come to town to trade for what they need without fear of getting rousted. Just the other day, Jonah Suller's boy was in town to get supplies, and they goaded him into a fight. The boy drew his sword, and one of Bull's men, Driscar, slew him on the spot." "Why the hell was he carrying a sword to town?" "That's just it. Everyone's so scared, they all go armed now." "Something even worse is going to happen. I just know it." "Why tell me?" "I thought you could talk to Bull, reason with him, get him to bring his men under control." "What makes you think Bull would listen to me?" "Because he knows you, and he respects you." "Respects me?" Kale scoffed. "Come on. Seriously, you're the only man I know that only did one job for him. He didn't force you to stay." He let you go." Kale stood up and walked to the open doorway. The breeze was starting to freshen a little, but was still warm. "He doesn't respect me, Eris." Kale gazed over the brown prairie. "He's just waiting on me to find my own way back." "What do you mean?" "How many settlers live around Warg-Tooth Crossing?" "Maybe 200. There's maybe 20 families and other odds and ends of folks, plus the shopkeepers in town." "And how are they doing?" "Some better than others, I suppose. It's a pretty hard life. Most ranch cattle and do a little mixed farming where they can irrigate. At least the market for beef and mesencanthe is good. The trails are open all the time nowadays for traders now that the war is over. But they're not exactly prosperous. No. In fact, some folks have come pretty close to starving. In the time since I've been here, I know of 2 homesteads that have packed up and left." "It's a hard life out there." "Not exactly the academy." Eris held up the hem of his soiled robe. "No, not exactly. And that's why Bull figures all he has to do with me is wait." Eris walked to the doorway and stood outside by Kale, who continued, "Bull knows that I will have to work my absolute ass off out here to maybe have a shot of having a successful ranch, assuming the wolves don't eat my cattle or they starve to death on dead grass. Others have made it. Families, sure, not guys like me, especially on my own. My expertise is in war fighting, not farming. I don't know the first thing about what I'm doing out here." Eris looked at the stable and yard. "It looks okay. You look like you're doing fine." "Oh, I can set up a camp just fine, which is really what I've managed to do here, but that's about it." "So why did you come? Why did you take the king's pension of land?" "Because I didn't know any better. I didn't think it would be this hard. I thought the land would be more hospitable. I guess I just didn't think it all the way through. All I knew is that I wanted to get away from the king's army." Kale took his pipe out and tapped it against the wall. He got some more tobacco out of a pouch and filled it up, then went inside to light a small stick in the embers of his fire. He lit his pipe with a few hearty puffs and offered the tobacco to Eris, who declined. "I've been smoking too much," Kale remarked. After a while, Eris offered, "You'll do fine here eventually. It just takes time. You have to give yourself a chance." Kale smirked and looked over at Eris. "Sure. Meanwhile, I could ride into town and make at least 200 gold pieces every few weeks. I'd have all the food and comfort I want and not have to worry about a damn thing. Except getting killed in a Silmat trade gone bad." "Maybe," Kale said as he took a long draw that he released slowly through his nose. "But I tell you, this is what Bull is waiting for. He's waiting for me to give up out here and come back looking for a job. If I come back on my own, he knows he's got me. That's why he didn't force me to stay." Eris furrowed his brow. "You could leave instead. If you don't want to make a go of your ranch, you could just leave." "And do what?" "I just end up doing merc work. It's what I'm good at, and it pays the bills. So if I'm going to end up as a sword for hire, might as well be here. Bull is ruthless, but pretty smart, and at least he's a known quantity." "Sounds like you've been giving this some thought." "To tell the truth, I haven't been thinking about much else." As the breeze picked up some more, a tumbleweed bounced across the road. It jumbled up against the stable, then broke free and went out of sight down the slope. "So you see," Kale eventually continued, "Bull doesn't really respect me, which means I don't think I can help you with your problem in town." "Maybe so, but don't sell yourself short. I think you do hold some sway with Bull, but I understand if you don't want to talk to him, how being there might put you in temptation's way." Kale shrugged, then took another draw. "How about you?" he asked. "How goes the apothecary business, or should I say the unpreaching business?" "One keeps food on my meager table such as it is, and the other I only mention at appropriate times. As you observed, life is hard out here, and folks tend to do a lot of praying." "Still think it's important to get folks to stop believing in the gods?" "Oh, there are definitely gods, I don't dispute that. What I think is important, though, is to make people understand that the gods are no better than us, and that reason and thought should guide your decisions, not trying to appease them. Whatever you say, Eris. Making any progress? Sometimes. You stay in touch with the Academy at all? It's very difficult to get mail to Lorvar, so not really. I keep detailed notes on my herb lore research, though, so that when I return, I'll be able to add to our store of knowledge. Really? You figured stuff out here on the plains of the lizard men that they don't know about in Lorvar? Oh yes, absolutely. There's this one particular route, a derivative of... Eris, Kale interrupted. I'm just a simple fighting man, remember? Ah yes, I do tend to get carried away. Both men stood looking at the afternoon sun. The breeze picked up to a moderate wind now. It's getting late, Eris, Kale observed. You might make it back to town before dark, but you're welcome to stay here with me. You can have the bed. I have my well-used bedroll. Eris held his hand up to the wind, then said, You're probably right. I thank you for your hospitality. I should have planned this better. You should get yourself a horse. I can't afford one. Apothecaries don't make much profit in small towns. As you say. Since you're staying, I'll warm up some stew for us. Perhaps you'd also like something a little stronger to drink than water. If you mean whiskey, then no thanks. But I wouldn't mind some boiling water. I have something special to make tea with that's even better. You can have your concoctions. Me, I'm going to have that drink. The next morning, the wind had died down, and it looked to be a fine fall day. After a quick breakfast of jerky and tack, Kale offered to ride double with Eris into town. Eris agreed, and while Kale saddled Raider and made ready, Eris went down to the stand of trees to look for components. Find anything you can use? Kale asked. As Eris returned up the hill. A couple things. You have a nice patch of dryad moss growing on the other side of the stream. I may have to stop back from time to time to get more. Who knew? Kale shrugged as he mounted Raider, then lifted Eris up on the back. He nudged the horse's ribs, and they began the ride into town. Tell me a little of the news of town, Kale asked. I haven't been in... For a while. All the shops still there? Anyone leave? Anyone come? We have a blacksmith in town again. Last year, when Derek left, folks had to mostly make do without. Of course, he left his forge and anvil, kind of peculiar. Anyway, Harl arrived with his wife and 2 sons about a month ago. He moved right into Derek's old shop and got things moving again. I think his business is doing well. That's good. Maybe I'll stop in and get some more nails. I hope that he stays. He hasn't been too happy with the rowdiness of Bull's crew and the way the town's been headed. I think that Bull told his boys to leave off, though, since they really need the services of a local smith. We all do. How about the general store and the livery? Still doing well. Conrad keeps the store just fine, especially with more traders coming back and forth from Aklasta. There's even talk of a stagecoach run being set up if they can improve the trail into a proper road, and Moss has steady business at the livery as always. Again, I think Bull keeps his boys away from them. It's the farmers that don't live in town that get the worst of it, as far as I can see. You said Bull has more men working for him now? How many more? I'm not sure exactly, but it has to be close to a dozen more. When he's not using them for shipping the Somat, they do actually patrol around, and there hasn't been any trouble with the Toth. But that many men just don't have enough to keep them busy. Plus, there isn't enough women here. Bull brought some more to do work at the Toad, but I don't know, it doesn't seem to be going in a good direction. Yeah, did I hear that a bank is coming? I've heard rumors to the effect that the Bosconian Mercantile is looking to set up a post out here. I don't know if I'd call it a bank exactly. I think Bull is dealing in so much money now that he's attracted the attention of the big city bankers. Letters of draft would be far easier to transport than gold or even gems, and there's profit to be made in the transactions, so I think the rumors are true, but I haven't seen anything specific yet. Seems like Warg-Tooth Crossing is hitting the big time. It's the Somat. I don't know, though. I've studied the history of people and civilizations at the Academy. I realize all that is academic and not the real world, but it seems to me that if we If we've drawn the attention of the Bosconian mercantile, we will draw a lot more attention from unsavory elements who will want a piece of the pie. I worry that when they come, there will be trouble. Yeah, that is a worry. That might be something for you to consider. If you go to work for Bull, you might find yourself in the middle of a turf war for the Somat. You know, that reminds me of something from way back. I remember talking with Quinn when I was in the jail, and she mentioned that Bull had some kind of ace in the hole, something special. Maybe that's part of his planning. You know anything about that? I've seen that Bull is shrewd, and the few times he's needed to, he's pretty handy with a sword, but I haven't seen anything out of the ordinary. I don't think it's anything magical either. As far as I know, I'm the only spellcaster around, so he hasn't retained any wizards. Not yet, anyway. He never had any problem running the steel crew, and those guys weren't polite types. Still, it does make me wonder. He ever ask you to do any magic for him? He doesn't think I have much magic that's of use to him. I make sure I have salves for wounds and potions for hangovers and such. I do have the ability to cast spells to cure wounds, but I've made sure to keep that secret. From time to time, they drag me out to give them an illusion show, but that's about it. Smart of you to keep your healing ability to yourself. They'd force you along on every trade meet if they knew. Just so, of course, if Bull's reach and trade is really expanding, then it's only a matter of time before he brings in wizards and clerics. You're still thinking of joining up with him, aren't you? I'm on the fence, Eris. I would still advise against it. However, if you are intent on doing so, I would make the best of the situation by asking that you wield some influence from within the group to quell the violence against the settlers. They are good folks and the true backbone of this town. You're putting the cart before the horse, Eris. I haven't decided that I'm joining up. Then why did you ride into town today? Kale looked back at Eris briefly, then returned his gaze to the trail. They were just entering the outskirts of the town now. A few folks were up and about going about business, but otherwise it looked quiet. Deceptively quiet, Kale thought. He spotted Eris's dwelling and brought Raider to a stop in front. Thanks for the ride, Eris said as he slid down. Whatever you decide, be careful. It's good having you around. You be careful too. This isn't the academy out here. A fact of which I am constantly reminded. Take care, Kale. So long. Kale nudged Raider down the dusty street. He pulled up beside the Toad, dismounted, and hitched Raider to the post. He stood beside Raider and rubbed his hands together, feeling a chill in the fall air. Just then Quinn appeared at the doors with a wash basin in her hands. She tossed the dirty water into the street, which soaked immediately into the ground. Hey, Kale, what brings you here? Necessity, Kale muttered. Is Bull back there?